remind everybody that we are recording this session. If you would like to not be on the recording, just feel free to turn your sound and your camera off. Definitely not required. We want to just take a minute to thank everybody for being here, our participants, our audience, our panel. This celebration is near and dear to my heart. I'm a first-gen student. I was part of the Upward Bound TRIO program. And I know there's just so many challenges that can come with being the first in your family to attend college and, you know, pursue this endeavor. So I wanted to take the time and celebrate this and just give us a chance to meet with each other, share our experiences. There are frequently these panels around this time of year because November 8th is always the National First Generation Day. Obviously, it being a Sunday, I figured it would probably fit everyone's calendar a little better to do it on a Monday. I hope you all enjoyed the lovely weekend that we had. We had great weather. But when I see these panels, I frequently just see a general discussion. And I think there are challenges that come with being first gen. And I think you can't pursue such a large challenge and you can't pursue a college education without changing at least a little bit as a person. The struggles that we go through make us who we are. And so I really wanted today's discussion to focus on how our panelists felt like they changed and grew and developed as people from the time they started their college journey all the way through now. If you have questions, I will ask you to put them in the chat. For now, I do have a few questions that we're going to start with for the panel, but towards the end, hopefully we'll have some additional time if people have questions that they were hoping to ask as well. So we're just going to start by doing quick introductions. I know I can't do our lovely panel justice, so I'm going to let them do a little intro for themselves. Like I said, thank you for coming. My name is Lauren Clifford. I'm one of the academic advisors for the Visions program here at the Mount. Kathy, do you mind starting us off a little bit about you, who you are now, maybe a little bit about just your family that you came from, the school that you went to, anything that you'd like to share with us?
Sure, absolutely. I'll start things off. Thanks everyone for coming on. And thanks Lauren for putting this together. This is actually really near and dear. So my name is Kathy Crespo. I actually grew up in Worcester. And if anybody knows Worcester, I grew up in Maine South, which is historically been a pretty high crime area, and just a really can be challenging growing up in that area. I am one of 4 girls in my family, my poor dad. And we are Puerto Rican in terms of our ethnicity, our heritage, and I'm very proud of that. And I am a first generation in my family to graduate college and go on to graduate school. So my parents are extremely proud. They're actually in the living room trying to hear, but they can't hear anything. But they're very excited. But yeah, I mean, growing up in Worcester, I attended one of the city high schools. I went to South High School. There was a murder my senior year, which really kind of just offset a lot of the things that I grew up with in my neighborhood. It was kind of something that we saw all the time. And I remember having questions about like, why is that happening? You know, there was a woman, I remember this very clearly, I must have been like 15, but somebody came and knocked on our door. She was looking for help, trying to leave her, her boyfriend who was hurting her. And I remember my parents got involved with it and we called the police and everything, but I just remember always having those questions in my head, like, why is this happening? And that question continued to kind of be something that I continued to try to answer. So becoming a social worker was kind of the next natural thing. I was actually going to be a police officer. And then kind of switched because I wanted to work with the community and kind of be on the side of justice in terms of from the victim's perspective. So that's kind of where I started. I went to Worcester State for a semester, and then I actually transferred to Clark University. And I went to Clark as a regular high school going into college age. And then I actually had to interrupt my education for a family. I have 3 kids, and then I finished my undergrad after my 3rd was born. And then I actually just finished my master's in 2018. So it's been a long journey as an adult. Developmentally, starting college after high school is very different than starting college at 33 and restarting and rebooting. And but I do think it's all meant to be. And that's kind of where I come from. So that's just a little bit. I don't want to take away from
No,
it.
that's perfect. Thank you. And I'm just going across my grid here if you're wondering how I'm picking people at random. Sean, do you mind going next?
Not at all. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Laroche. I am a senior research analyst in our Department of Institutional Research. I have been at the Mount for nearly 8 years now. It's my first job in higher education. I came from a private industry job before this. I find the work interesting every day, and I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. It's a little bit of a sidebar, but I rarely get the opportunity to interact directly with students. Other than when they're coming down to the end of the Wetmore Center and they're often lost trying to look for the gym or somewhere else on campus. So being able to kind of impart some of my experiences is a really cool opportunity for me. I grew up in North Brookfield, Massachusetts, which is a small central Massachusetts town, about 45 minutes south of the Mount. Very small town. I graduated, my high school graduating class was 39 people. I am the oldest of 3 children, and I'm the only one of my siblings to go to college. My mother had started college, but never finished. I was born when she was 23, so that I imagine that played some part in it. But she and my father got married when they were very young, and I think they just decided to go on a different path than to take the collegiate route. I went to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. So I've been in central Massachusetts almost my whole life, if you want to count Amherst as central Massachusetts. And that was certainly a culture shock, going from a high school graduating class of 39 to classrooms where I'd often have 200 people in the same room with me. And that was where being a first generation student was really difficult for me because I didn't have a lot of places to turn. I didn't have a lot of resources back home to kind of lean upon. And kind of going through my experiences that I guess we'll talk a lot about through this presentation is, finding people that could help me along the way was certainly a challenge, but a rewarding experience in the end.
Great. Thanks so much, Sean.
Thanks.
Brianna, you're up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Pena. I am a senior career development counselor over on the Devens campus for Mount Wachusett. And so my story is I am obviously a first generation student going to college. And I was lucky enough, I didn't really realize I was a first generation college student, like what the context of all that was, even though I knew my parents didn't go to college. But they've always been really supportive of education and pushing it. And they're, they always strive for me to have a better life than that they had. I come from, I'm very open about it. I have learning disabilities. I've had an IEP since I was like in kindergarten. I don't even know. So, I was lucky enough that my parents, because of my IEP, sent me to a private school, but there's a whole different realm when you're dealing with a private school aspect of the expectations of going to Ivy League schools and doing this and doing that. And all the things I've learned about like the community college and the state college system, how to work through my IEP as a first generation student, dealing with now being an adult and nobody can help. My mom can't answer questions and things like that. It's been really a crazy ride. And I kind of laugh because my friend actually asked me the other day, like, what did I want to do when I grew up? And it's interesting to me as a career counselor to see the full circle of some passions that I had as a child and where it's all kind of come to fruition in some capacity. So, I'm centrally located. I live in Townsend, Massachusetts now. I was from Leominster. I went to St. Bernard's for high school. And then, I continued on. I went to Keene State. I always joke and say I kind of had a mental breakdown / my midlife crisis when I was a freshman, because I realized that the schooling that I chose wasn't the right thing for me. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I'm wasting all this money. And I ended up transferring and living back home and going to Worcester State. and it was probably the best decision of my life. I came out of it pretty debt free. And I was able to go on and improve that, you know, college and having an interest in what you're studying, with or without disabilities. I ended up getting my master's degree right after because of the economy, partly to do with it, but it was one of the biggest rewards of my life. And I can tell you guys right now, like, I still have it in my back pocket that someday I want to go get my PhD for no reason other than I want to be like Dr. Brianna Pena, like how could that be? And just be able to say it. So like, which my husband's not really thrilled about that because he knows how much money comes with that. But someday, I mean, it's a lofty goal. But yeah, that's who I am in a nutshell, guys. And I'm sure I'm going to instill a lot more of who I am in the question. So Lauren, I'll let you take it back.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect segue. So the first thing that I wanted to ask our panel and have you guys share is kind of 3 parts, kind of what you dreamed of being when you grew up, when you were a little kid. There was something specific, you know, what was your intended path when you started college? Maybe that's, you still had that childhood dream, maybe it was something different. And then kind of what you're doing now and how, I know some of you answered that a little bit, but how did you get there if it wasn't exactly what you intended from the beginning? And I kind of think I've heard a little bit of everybody say, they maybe, you know, at 3, we're not dreaming of the career that they have now. So, you know, if whatever order we'd like to do it in, but yeah, tell me a little bit about the path and the dream.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, Brianna, go ahead.
Okay. I'll just go through that because I know I kind of jumped into that a little bit.
No, you're perfect. Go ahead.
So I went to college to be a teacher. I remember being a little girl, you know, the little girl being with all her cousins and siblings and being like, let's teach and let's do this. And because of my interaction with education and the intensity, and I don't mean intensity as a bad way, but like I'm being pulled out of class, doing my IEPs, doing my language, doing my speech, doing everything in between, I see the value being a teacher could bring to the table and what kind of difference it made in my life. Having somebody believe in me throughout my K through 12. So I wanted to be a teacher. I went to Keene State, top school. I was like, this is best of both worlds. I'm out of my house, my parents' house. I'm going to college. And then I went my first semester and they were talking about the AccuPlacer tests, or whatever, not AccuPlacer tests, but the teacher tests that you have to pass and MTELs and what the statistics are, like passing and all this kind of crazy stuff. And I'm like, I'm awful at taking tests. Awful. I am a hands-on, let me talk to people, let me learn things, let me do stuff. So that's where I had I jokingly say that I sit where I had my mental breakdown, my like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, I want to do something. I've always had in my head, I'm going to be a teacher. So fast forward, you know, my mom does marketing and I always had an eye for creativity and her marketing and always kind of like popped it. I was lucky she worked from home. So I was popped in and being like, oh, what are you doing? And talking. So I ended up going for marketing. I went to, you know, where I still had the creativity piece, like teaching, you definitely have to be creative being a teacher. And I realized real fast though, after doing the college, the 4 years, and even after getting my master's wasn't as bad because I got to do like social media as it was coming out and advertising, all that what marketing is. And I'm laughing a little bit because I know Stephanie England is on this and we've had this conversation quite a bit where I love marketing, but I would never want to go back to it. Because I'm I realize as I've learned, it's the people that I love. It's that interaction and it's connecting the dots and all that kind of stuff. Not behind a computer and doing the type of marketing I was doing after graduating. So I was lucky enough, I found an opportunity to work at a career center as a business service rep. And as a business service rep, you had to market the career center. You had to go brand yourself, / the career center. You had to bring things back, but it was building relationships. And it really, honest to God, was, as I call them, God winks that fell into my lap of something that I never knew existed. I never knew this type of role existed, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And over the 4 years I was there, I learned about higher ed and how these jobs all were around. And you know, I kind of laughed to myself because now I am a teacher. Like my friend was saying, he's like, you are a teacher, Brianna. Like, and I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you teach people about all the different career paths and all the different jobs that are out there. And you teach them how to write resumes and you teach them how to do this. It's just not, here's your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. And I was like, wow, you know what? You're right. Like,
I want to let Kathy and Sean answer, but that's exactly what I want our audience is taking away, that, you know, study what you're passionate about and continue to, you know, follow the path that's in front of you. You don't always have to know exactly, like Brianna is saying, where you want to be. And I feel very similar. I studied elementary education, but obviously I work with all of you college students now. And it just, I think the point of the story is that you don't have to know 100% from the get-go where you're going to go, and that's okay. And by networking and pursuing interest, you'll find the right thing for sure. Kathy or Sean, do you want to jump in, Sean?
Yeah, I don't mind going next. So as you know, my kind of funny big dream as a kid, I always wanted to be the next great left fielder for the Boston Red Sox. Around the age of 13, I decided, it became evident that wasn't going to happen. So when I went to college, my original intent was to get into editing. I had originally thought that it would be great to go and help publish textbooks, possibly even fiction and things like that. That was kind of the big dream. And as I honed in on what I was really good at with it, I ended up working in more of a kind of technical writing capacity. The internet at that time was really starting to explode, and I really feel like I'm dating myself by saying that, but it was really kind of the explosion of the internet and online media that was coming to be. And there was a real demand for content creation and content curation. So that was kind of where I was going with that. I went on a liberal arts track. Coming out of college, I had no problem finding a job. I got a job right away. I worked for a company called McGraw-Hill, which you might know from textbooks, but I worked in a group that was a construction information division. So I ended up writing and editing reports about the construction industry, about how much construction was happening in different parts of the country, about individual projects that were impacting areas. And as time kind of went on with that, about 4 or 5 years into that, I ended up finishing all my work by noon every day. I wasn't really being challenged. I thought about looking for other things. And the group had a burgeoning analytics division, kind of measuring the construction industry, how much was going on in this part of the country, how much was expected to go on in this part of the country, and taking that information taking the numbers of that information and putting it into context for people. So I ended up working for the next 7 or 8 years as essentially an economist, forecasting construction and writing about construction. And it got to the point where I kind of capped out where I was going to be unless I wanted to move to where McGraw-Hill's headquarters were in the city and things. I really wasn't interested in that. I grew up in central Massachusetts at that point. I was married with young kids and kind of rooted in the area, and I really wasn't interested in that. So when I found the listing for the Mount job, it really was a lot of the same things that I was doing. So point A to point Z, it was definitely not what I intended to get into. And I worked with numbers way more than I ever intended to going into college. I was really hoping to be more on the back end book end of it, the website end of things. But now I'm working with numbers all the time, and I can help explain to people what they mean and put it into context. And that's it's rewarding that I can still do some of what I went to school for, and continue to build my skills in terms of the science and math and business aspect of it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Sean. I love about your story. I know even when you shared with us one-on-one that it was really about finding your skill set and honing in on that, and using that to your advantage. And I think, our traditional K-12 system doesn't always give us the full chance to explore our strengths. And so it might not be till you get to college to really feel around and find what you really excel at. And then, and again, that's helping to lead to careers that maybe you hadn't thought about before. Kathy, do you have anything on that topic you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked a little bit about this, and I was laughing about the numbers because that is totally not the field I'm in. But, you know, I think earlier when I was talking about the questions why, it definitely led me to social work. But I started working in an accounting department at an old car dealership because I'm the first one to go to college, but also financing was a huge challenge for my family, as it is for many families even today. But certainly for our family, this was like, my parents didn't have the means to send me to college. So I was constantly hustling. I was working many jobs to kind of get through. And I still do today, but anyways, but I began volunteering at a women's shelter. And then that turned into kind of a part-time job, which turned into kind of more knowledge about community services and kind of what was happening in terms of juvenile justice and social services in general. And that led me to the Department of Children and Families. So I've been with the Department of Children and Families for almost, gosh, I don't want to say I'm old, about 26, almost 20 years. And so that kind of qualmed, even though I felt like in my heart I was going to be a police officer, but over time, my heart really was with families and working with families. And so that's kind of what I did. So I became an investigator probably about 18 years ago. And so I actually was doing investigations, and now I actually oversee statewide a unit for special investigations, which is basically kids who are in foster care, daycare settings. And so we kind of oversee that unit and we investigate those cases. But, and then the teaching kind of came in late in terms of when I got my master's, I was just like, okay, now what? I don't know if I want to get the PhD, Brianna, I don't know about that. But I said, you know what? I think I'm in a spot where I can teach this forward. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. And that's kind of why I'm here at the Mount. And I'm so excited to meet students from all kinds of ages. I thought I would have all these kind of younger kids, but I've been having so many amazing adults come through with so much experience who are first-time college students. And so it's definitely a unique framing that happens for everybody individually.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Kathy. So this next question can be a little more personal, so definitely feel free to share as much or, you know, is in a way that's comfortable. But if you are willing, I would love for you guys to share with us a little bit about, as you attended college, how your thoughts and feelings about the world, about the community you lived in, just perspective, how it changed, and if it impacted any of your relationships, if so, how? So relationships with family, friend groups, anything like that. Or maybe it all stayed exactly the same, and I'd love to hear that as well. Any takers on who wants to start?
I'll say a little bit. I mean, just for me, I mean, now I'm the social worker for the family. So there's always like, well, can I ask you this question? So you kind of get that a little bit. But in terms of education, I mean, it's definitely with human services, with social work, there's always questioning your values. You're always kind of mirroring what's happening in the world and how that affects you and how you're putting that energy back out. So there's definitely been a lot of reframing. I've had to do a lot of kind of personal education with even coworkers and colleagues around domestic violence, around sexual assault, which, you know, back in the 90s wasn't something that was so extremely talked about. But there I was going into schools doing programming. And so then it became part of my language, which was something that hadn't been brought up with. And so it's kind of becoming, you know, getting those tools and resources that you're learning along the way in your experiences, but then also kind of bringing it forward and teaching folks that it's okay to talk about this. You know, having a conversation with my parents about sexual assault and like what it can mean and the impact is a complete generational difference of really, you really have to be open to that. So it's been really a learning. You're always kind of like what Brianna said, you are teaching all the time with your experiences, especially when you're a first-time generational student, because your family and your siblings and your cousins and, you know, don't have that experience that you have, being exposed to the amounts of research, the amounts of experiences, just the learning, the people that you're surrounded with, either at the Mount or any college, you're just getting into such a big audience of knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kathy, but I know for some people that role reversal, right, of being the expert or being the teacher with people that are older than you, whether it's older siblings, aunts, uncles, parents, that both for the student and then that other person can be, interesting. We'll leave it at that. Sometimes it's a positive change, but in some families that's not as accepted. But I just want people to hear that, that happens and that's not uncommon. Yeah, and then, family asking you all these questions. Well, suddenly you're the expert on IT or social work or psychology. And, you as the student, you're like, well, I've only taken 3 classes so far. So yeah, it can be a really interesting dynamic. Brianna, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I'll throw in there. So from my perspective, it really opened my eyes going to college. So I went to St. Bernard's because I actually was, and I'm very open about anything. So I actually really bullied really bad in about 5th grade. And the school system this was way before the bullying prevention and all that stuff happened. But there was nothing they did about it. They didn't really care, the public schools. So I was very lucky. My parents were like, between IEPs and all this stuff, we're going to send you to a private school. You can and get, deal with this. So I had that. But going to a private school, it was wonderful for my IEP aspect, but it had such a small circle of kids. I know I'm not a small school as Sean at 39 students, but I graduated only with 100 students max kind of thing. So my world was very confined. It was just the way it was. And going to a state school, going to, a public state school where it was eye-opening. And it also made me realize as a student, there were so many other people out there, obviously ethnicities and backgrounds and stuff like that. But for me, for my aspect about learning disabilities, and I got to learn how other people did study sessions and how other people did, what this all meant. As a first-time generation student, how do I ask the professor if I can get extended time? I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, or this or that. And it was awesome. It was good. It was scary, but it was awesome. And, I can't tell you enough. I came from the lucky side of the house where my family was very supportive and stuff, but my friends, the dynamic of the pub, I went to a public entity of the college system, and I had a lot of friends that went to Babson and Bentley and top schools. Nothing's wrong with that, the great education, but they all graduated like me without any job afterwards because the economy when we graduated was not it was we were down in the dumps. So it made me kind of look at it again, realizing the value that I get as somebody who chose to go to a state school and lucky enough to come out of college very, like I said, minimal considering debt. And they kind of got mad at me for it when we talk about student loans. And I was like, oh, I only have whatever. And they're like, I have $150,000 in debt. And I'm like, good luck finding a job right now. And, we all now, 10, 12 years later out of college, it's all out of the wash at this point. But at the same time, at the beginning of getting out of college, it was interesting. It was an interesting new dynamic that we had, and I will also just add, my motivation, I was telling Lauren this last time we talked was, it makes me feel laugh, but, the dynamic I had with my family was great, but also going from public school in elementary to private school, elementary and high school, we still had to use the public school system for my IEP. And I specifically remember, guys, my mom at 16 years old said, Brianna, I want you to come and listen to this. You need to learn what's going on because sooner or later, I'm not going to be able to be an advocate for you. And I said, okay. And the lady basically was like, because I had A's and B's in high school, that they didn't want to give me any more services. And I have hearing loss, I have hearing aids, and they didn't want to give me all these different things that I, as a student, had the rights to. But because I didn't go to their school directly at their school, and oh my God, guys, I can remember that was the biggest motivation I ever had to and I will admit, and I'm open to this, I did send them my master's degree certificate, a copy of it. To the lady, and I did, but I said, thank you. You were the motivation. It was a negative situation that really still to this day gets me like, how can you tell a student not to succeed? Like they did not want me to continue. Like they were like, I'm not gonna help you because I wasn't failing because I busted my butt to do it. But it motivated me. And so Kathy, that's why I more so want to do my PhD for the mere fact that I just want to be like, yeah, I did this. I don't like, I'm like, this is awesome.
She takes that to a whole new level.
Finding those mentors, guys, in college, finding those mentors, they're fantastic. And take the negative sometimes when you feel it. And sometimes it's those negative professors or those negative adults in your life and using it for your positive. So I know I did.
Absolutely. Don't let those negative thoughts hold you back.
Yeah, exactly.
John, any thoughts on your views on the world and how?
Sure. I'll be very quick about how my views on the world change, because coming from a very small town and a very small school, going to, the University of Massachusetts was certainly an eye-opening experience. I saw different cultures that I had never seen. Again, just even class sizes, living in the dormitories, it was a very, very different experience. And it certainly took some adjusting, and not having somebody to kind of fall back on at home was, it made it a little bit harder. But what I'd like to focus a little bit more on, like the family part of it. We talked about this a little bit in our presentation meeting, that you do get a little, from my point of view, I got a little bit of pressure from home about, okay, you should go to college, you should do this, you should do that. And the family kind of say that without knowing what's involved in it. And you kind of have to put on a good face, even when you're struggling. And that personally was the hardest part of it for me. Was I have all these expectations and I have all of these, people kind of pushing me in this direction because it's the right thing to do. But knowing, kind of developing where I wanted to go as I went through college really helped me get past that point of, I'm just doing this because it's the right thing to do. I ended up getting into a field that I really enjoyed and getting into a career that I really enjoy. And I think being able to find something that you really like to do can take some of that pressure off. It's not just you're doing it just because, you're doing it because you have an intent, you have a goal at the end.
Thank you so much for bringing those points up. I think those are so important. We outwardly talk about the challenges when family doesn't support the goal to go to college. That's definitely absolutely difficult. But a lot of times we don't talk about when family does want you to go, but has no idea what they're asking and expecting you to do, how difficult that can be. Definitely an experience I can relate with. How many times, if you lived at home or lived on campus and you're visiting home, you come home for the weekend and family is like, well, you need to help with the chores, or why are you spending so much time with your nose in that book, and not understanding that, it's not high school. It's not like do 2 hours of homework on Friday and maybe I can get away with a free weekend. You might be doing homework all weekend long, right? I guess it was just a really quick story that I really love. When I did my master's degree, I lived with my grandmother, and she's from the Azores Islands of Portugal. Very intelligent woman, but obviously never attended traditional education as we know it. She did more of the school to be proper lady, how to crochet and do some of those things. And when I lived with her during my master's degree, she'd ask how I'm doing. And I'm just like, oh, I'm just so busy. She would say, Lauren, if you would just sit down and get your homework done, you could enjoy your weekends. And you don't back talk to grandma. You just, yep, you're right. If I just try a little harder, when deep down, it's almost unlimited reading sometimes, right? And so, yeah, a little bit of how do you respect family boundaries, but also, putting in what it takes to get that college degree. And there's no right or wrong answer. I wish we could share today what the magic solution is. Everybody's family is different. The other thing just that our great panelists brought up was, the friend group. I know that at my high school, I moved around a lot, but when I graduated, I ended up being in a smaller area, 90 kids in my graduating class. I would love for our audience to just know that you might find a different type of friend group when you do come to college. Sometimes in high school, depending on where you're from, you're not really choosing your friend group. You have a select number of people that you can spend time with, or even that society says we can spend time with. And college might be the time where you get to find like-minded people. I know that I had to hide liking school in high school because I moved around. I happened to be accepted by this group, and it wasn't cool to be smart. And so I do hope that you guys are finding freedom to find like-minded people. Brandon, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so my husband always laughs at me because he comes from a big group of like firefighter friends. They're all like, I don't even know how many are there. They're all friends. They're all in the like-mindedness, and that's how it is, and that's great. But I have, because like Lauren said, I do still have my friends from high school, my like core friends that I have made those lasting relationships with. Didn't stay friends with nearly as many as I once had. But then I had groups from like the Leominster public school system that I was still friends with, and then from my college, and now obviously being an adult, which is so weird, even concept of that, but being an adult, I have friends from TD, like my years of TD Bank, working at TD Bank and Mount Wachusett, and your friends. That's the trickle effect. Sometimes you're going to have this big group of friends that you stay friends with forever. And other times you have these parsiments of friendships that you learn that have mutual interest in certain areas one way or another. And that's not a bad thing, because that took me a little bit to figure out, because I was so accustomed to like being that friend that had all these people and big groups of friends. And well, I can't invite these friends because they don't get with these friends. And, and I'm like, you know what? As I got older and I realized I enjoy my time with them when I'm with them, and I enjoy my time when I'm with them. And that's okay. Like, you're going to learn that, you can still share interests with people as you grow and mature and change, and just keep tally with them at whenever it may feel fit. So I just know that like how much my friendships have dramatically changed, good, bad.
That's okay. That's absolutely okay.
Yeah.
Some people are still best friends with everybody from high school, and some people it's all new college friends, and
Yeah.
no right or wrong. Kathy.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of on the tail end of what you were saying, Lauren and Brianna. I mean, college is one of those opportunities where you do get to pick folks who are like-minded, as opposed to feeling like, oh, my parents may not like this person or that, And so college is really a place where you can really open up and reframe and explore and really learn. And if you're open to the learning, you absolutely can learn about so many different things that are happening in our world and in other worlds, which is really exciting. I think, in reference to a question that I saw, friends, like, I think we all said you have them for seasons, right? And so there's some that you value for certain reasons, and some for others, and some you have for a lifetime, and some for just for the time that you know them. And all of those things are special. I think one of the things that I remember most about my experience was just always kind of the pity that you're going into social work, and oh my goodness, and there's so much suffering, and and God bless you, and I can't believe you do that job, and blah, blah, blah. But, other than that, I mean, I definitely didn't ever feel like I was not supported. I felt like people just felt, I was kind of up against it because there's so much suffering in this world. And that was that can almost feel like they're not supportive, because then you kind of feel like you're a little bit isolated. But again, then you kind of build those natural supports with your schoolmates, your colleagues, who will be your colleagues in the future. Also, the professors, you do make a personal connection with them. And even though we're in this pandemic and virtual, I have really gotten to know a lot of my students because of that, because we've had to do live talks, and we've had to do a lot of emailing and conversations. So you definitely do make connections. I mean, I still have connections with some students who I had a couple semesters ago who are looking for, referrals or need help with stuff in the community, and we still are connected. So, I consider all these people connected to me for the different experiences that I've had, even since I've been teaching at the Mount, which is exciting.
Absolutely. And if you guys haven't seen it, Kathy's starting to touch on a question from the chat, which if anybody has any questions, please, throw those in. I'd love to answer a couple audience questions in the last few minutes. But the question is about dealing with friends or family who are not valuing your college choices, don't understand what you do or why you're doing what you're doing. I will say that I don't think anybody here can give, one fits all advice. I think we'll share some of our experiences, but it is about finding some trusted resources, both mentors in your field, but also even, I'm a huge mental health advocate, and counseling and talking through those things. Because I also think there's a difference when people target you specifically in your goals, but also, I think come across a lot of just general, oh, those people that went to college, they think they're so smart. And that's also an interesting dynamic when you're like, but I'm right here. So I don't know if anybody wants to talk a little bit about, obviously Brianna talked about people outside of the family. Those were, counselors, but anybody that's close to your heart that maybe didn't support you or doesn't understand what you do today.
I will just chime in fact, and say, I didn't necessarily have family who belittled my education, because even though my mom and dad didn't go to college, they valued it, the world education, and they're some of the smartest people I know. But with that being said, I did change my major. I changed technically. I changed it 3 times. And now I'm in a whole different arena in grand of technicalities. And my mom didn't understand that. Like, she didn't understand how I had interest in one thing, and that's what I was supposed to be going to college for. And I changed my degree, and, well, you just wasted how many classes and how many credits. And she was trying to, and, I was like, but Mom, like, I'm not going to be successful. So why am I going to continue this if I'm not going to be successful in this degree long term? You know what I mean? And at one point I wanted to actually quit for a little bit, because I just was like, I need to figure out what I want to do. And I'm glad I didn't, because I probably would have lost my momentum. But at the same time, I didn't have that being like, yeah, try it out, try this, try that. It was just like, I don't get it. I don't get what's going on. Like, why can't you just figure, you like it, do it? And I'm like, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. So I was lucky I had it, but I still had that piece of it. And it was, the way I did it is, honestly, I had some amazing professors. And I laugh because, Kathy, I still, to this day, I graduated in 2009, so God only, and from my master's, and I still have professors that I'm connected to on LinkedIn, from my undergrad and my graduate. So we check in and we talk and we network, and I use them. I used to use them before I had a lot of professional references for my job references and things like that. And they've been huge advocates across the board for as many years as I can remember. So
absolutely. Sean, did you have anything?
Yeah, I'll be pretty brief about it, but I have dealt with that to some extent, in terms of family members. It's more not understanding and not valuing what the education is and what I got out of it. I think that my family members see that I'm doing relatively well, that, I have a pretty decent house. I have 4 acres of land. Both my kids go to public school. They do lots of extracurricular activities. The perception is that I'm doing well, but they don't really understand how I necessarily got there. And they don't understand the value of what I went through to get there and what it kind of took to get to this point. And I've dealt with, kind of snarky comments about, oh, well, you went to college, so you must be this or that. And I think the question specifically said, do I feel about belittling? I don't feel like it's belittling, but I feel like I'm subject to a little bit more of kind of almost what the term, I almost have to be made feel guilty for it, that I've been successful for it. My brothers certainly had the same opportunities, and they chose not to pursue that avenue. And because I'm doing well, I kind of face a little bit of that scrutiny. But all I do is I put on a good face and say, I'm happy with the path that I chose, and that's where I go from that. I just kind of face it directly head on, and I don't, it's just noise to me. I would just treat it as noise.
I definitely just want to take a minute to just validate that point of view. The panelists and I are all talking about it from the perspective of now, from what I know, financially being stable. And it can be so hard when you are, especially that more traditional right out of high school student, where you are not to that place yet and you are still dependent on family and family's dependent on you. And so I don't at all want to make it sound like, oh, just, go ahead and do whatever you want and it'll be okay. I understand that struggle, it's so real and it is so difficult. And that's, again, finding those mentors, those people you can trust to talk through that. But I hope that from us, you can see that, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and that once you have that success, there's a little bit more freedom there. So I'm just seeing a couple other questions in the chat. Brianna, did you have one you wanted to answer for somebody?
Yeah, no, and this is great for everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
So Fernando, you were asking about, have you taken personality quizzes and tests? And if so, did they decide what fields and careers to study for? And then, we'll go from there. So I will tell you a quick story of me, quick, right? You guys know what I talk about. Anyway, I love it. I actually am volunteering / super part-time at my high school that I graduated with recently for internships for them, because they see the value that's there that they need to bring to their students, which is fantastic, because I think all high schools should be doing this more so. But I remember going through the interview with them and saying, I specifically remember sitting at that table, filling out a bubble test with a sister. I still had a nun at the time at that school. And her just saying, okay, well, that's what you're going to do for the, that's what you're told to do. And it was like a Myers-Briggs test. It wasn't that specifically, but it was so wide and so big. And it was very overwhelming. And I was I saw a teacher and I was like, well, that makes sense because I want to be a teacher. Okay, then yeah, I'll do it, whatever. Let me tell you, there are so many amazing resources out there that you can figure out about your personality test. So there's things, obviously, Myers-Briggs that we can take. People have to pay for that to get certified. And then there's usually a cost associated with it when you have to take the actual exam some places, but it's worth it because it does give you a good indication. But I also am a strong believer in a program called the Strength Profile Finder. And it talks more about the strength that you bring to the table. So are you really good in math? Are you good in science? Are you good in communication? And then it helps you from those aspects, bring you into a career field that might be a good suit for you. There's also I love this one called Card Sort. Again, it's just about your passions and your interests. And as a career development coach, I am a huge believer in being able to find, take your interests, what you have, what you're good at. And it might not always be what you love to do. You might be really good at math, but you don't want to do it, kind of thing. And then finding that middle ground and finding something that you really are happy doing for the rest of your life, or, they're close thereof. I will also tell you guys that you should go to mwcc.edu. I want to believe it is. And as somebody who I think is a huge asset, they tell you about the codes and everything, we call them the NEAC codes and stuff like that. But it tells you all about what type of education you're going to need. Do you need just an associate's degree and to do this job successfully? Do you need associate's degree with certificates? Do you need your bachelor's or your master's? Or did you know that really what you want to do for the rest of your life, you need a PhD to do this? There's so
important. And we're so lucky to have great resources like Brianna and just plenty of people on campus that just because I know passion and she's going to.
I know, I will, but I want to throw one more thing out there for you guys. Okay. To realize. So on that website, there is a calculator on there that you talk about debt for college, right? And you want to figure out what these kind of ranges are, the realistic median averages of what a salary is. Because I know going out of college, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to make $60,000 a year. And that's just not going to be the case. But it tells you those ranges. It tells you what you need. But it also has a calculator for high school students and early college to tell you what a realistic living on your own price tag is going to cost you. So what the average insurance or rent and cable and this. And so you have an idea, a realistic idea of how much money living on your own adult is going to cost you. And you can kind of put it all together. So I know that was a huge eye opener for me when I was playing with it. And I always want you guys to figure that out, because the last thing I want any of you guys to do is get in a crazy amount of debt and then get a job that only pays $30,000 a year. You know, there's ways to figure those things.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, unfortunately, I don't think we can cover the debt piece here. It's such a personal decision, and depending on your career and all things like that. So we have 5 minutes left. I'm just going to ask each of our panelists, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you had to go back and give yourself, whether it's at 18 or whatever, one piece of key advice, what would that one magical piece of advice be?
Do you mind if I start?
No, please do.
This is one that I kind of feel very passionate about because I really, really wish I had done this when I was much younger. Is when you're a first generation student and you don't have a lot of resources to be able to lean back upon, it's really hard for you to kind of accept advice from people. You feel like you have to be in control of everything because you don't have anybody else to lean on. And I really, really wish that I had sought out more resources, that I had sought out a mentor earlier in my life. And for somebody like me, if it doesn't come through here, I'm a complete introvert. Talking in front of people is like the last thing I want to do. But I feel very passionately about this and really about getting out there and looking for resources. Put yourself out there, no matter if it makes you uncomfortable or not. That's the thing that if I could go back 18 years of my life right now, that is what I would tell myself. You know, be willing to accept the advice. Don't just do it for lip service. Be willing to listen to that advice.
I appreciate that. Thank
To
you.
piggyback on what Sean said, because that would be it's very similar to my advice. One thing as I've gone into these fields, I really regret not doing is more internships. And I'm not talking Northeastern internships that need to be a whole semester long or anything like that, but even calling somebody up that's a family friend or anything for that matter, and saying, hey, can I come shadow you for a day? Or even, can I talk to you on the phone for an information session about what your day is like to understand these questions? Because if I knew what I knew about different fields sooner, it would have probably guided me. You know, I don't regret the decisions. I don't think any of us regret our decisions that we've made in the paths we've done because it's made us who we are, but it may have made it a little bit quicker to become where we are. And I just wish I had those opportunities to have those internships and those relationships and resources. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kathy?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is when Sean was talking, I was like, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of those things where obviously hindsight is 2020, right? But I think that one of the great things about this panel is that hopefully, you know, I can be that for another student who's kind of going through those struggles. Back then, I was very worried about asking questions. I didn't know your professors could be flexible. I didn't know a lot of those things that I know now and now I practice. But, you know, I think that the ability to ask questions is your biggest asset because that's really the only way to advocate for yourself. And I'm sure there were a lot of missed opportunities by myself because I didn't want to ask those questions or I was worried or I didn't know. So I think knowledge is key and really just asking those questions. And, you know, it's really one of those uncomfortable feelings, but you gotta kind of have to work yourself into being comfortable with asking, you know, those above you. And even if you find one professor, one person who you can say, hey, what do you think about this? Or maybe that, you know, and I hope that I can be that for my students and for people in general, because it's such a help to have somebody to help you navigate. And it's a huge asset and you'll just end up doing it for other people once you get there. So yeah.
Perfect.
It's a skill that you're going to learn for the rest of your life, guys. Because I can tell you,
absolutely.
34 years old, I'm still doing it. Like I'll go to Jason and I'll go to Leanne, to everybody else in the other college, and be like, can you teach me what you guys know? Because they've been doing it longer than I have, and absolutely can figure that skill out and feel comfortable doing it. We're all here to help you.
So before people head out, two things. There is in the chat an evaluation form. If you are part of our audience, we really would love for people to give us a little bit of feedback. We love to do stuff like this. So feel free to take a look at that link and let us know what you thought. And secondly, I just can't thank our panelists enough. Everybody's so busy. But you guys just great personal stories, great advice. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you, audience, for joining us. Hopefully you feel like you are leaving this empowered and excited. I'll hang around for a few minutes if other people have specific questions, want to know about our program, or need you, you know, any links forwarded. But thank you all so much.
I'm just saying, Fernando, if you want, I can give you my email on the thing and I can send you some of those personality tests that you want. And I mean, we do the college, I don't know the individual who got hired for that position, but there is a person who should know all this stuff as well, but I'd be happy to share that information with you as well.
Okay, great.
I will happily put my, and this is for all the other students as well, feel free. But
Yeah, if you post it on the chat, I think that'll be great.
yeah, no, I absolutely will. And like I said, I'd be happy to share it. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about careers. So there you go.
And I know people have commitments, so if anybody does need to head out, I'm gonna actually stop the recording.
Thank you so much.